In the beginning of my creator experience, the thing that made me more money as I got better at it was becoming more influential. As I got more subscribers, as I got more views, guess what? I got more opportunities, more brand deals, more opportunity to make lots of money. But then the question was, should I be working more on the business to 10x the money making potential, or should I continue growing my influence? It's always the big question that I've always had. In fact, we've had as a couple, Judy and I, and in our family vlogging business on YouTube, because in a day you only have, let's just call it 8 hours. If anybody works 8 hours in a day, do you put 4 hours to building your influence, meaning creating content, optimizing that content, responding to people and building the relationship with your audience so that you get more subscribers and get a bigger reach? Or do you work on your business? This could be your team. This could be your product, your course. Do you, reach out to more brand reps or whatever? You can only choose, right? Some people choose to do all 8 hours, all influence. I'll let other people take care of it. But we know what happens. No one's going to care about it as much as you. So then you're like, hey, do I spend 7 hours working on my business, only 1 hour, because guess what? I already have influence. But what happens then? Then you start losing influence, or maybe other people catch up or get ahead of you. So the age-old question for creators that I've had, and I know everybody has, is what is more important? Building your influence to be able to build a business, or do you build a business that with whatever influence you have lets you make the most amount of money?
Yeah, Grant is a creator that I met in Seattle, I want to say about a year ago now, not very long. But one thing that makes him interesting is not only did he create a successful YouTube channel, but he created a big enough of a brand where it got bought out. And I have never met anybody where they were able to sell their business but still be part of the business in regards to their YouTube channel. What's that called, cortado?
Well, yeah, there's all sorts of different names. Like a macchiato usually is just like, traditionally is one of these guys, like a little scoop of steamed milk. Cortado can even have like half and half, a little bit bigger. There's piccolo, that's a tiny, this is kind of like a cortado piccolo, the way I like it.
Oh, piccolo. Is that like a mini latte?
Yeah, tiny latte.
Let's make that. Well, what you made for me before, it was in this.
Yeah, I don't care what anybody says. Nobody knows the real names of all these latte drinks.
Because every time you go to like first off, not every
guidelines.
Business has every single
They have
option.
their own slight definitions.
And then secondly, not every barista knows all the options, even, right? And then, of course, what's the popular one? A lot of people ask me when they ask me to pick up coffee, give me a caramel macchiato. But even that is like open up a can of worms of like what does that even mean?
Yeah.
Like, you know what baristas always ask me when I ask for that? It's not for myself, it's for whoever.
It's for somebody else.
No, they go, are you asking about a Starbucks caramel macchiato or an actual macchiato?
Yeah, the big difference.
He's also a cook, used to be a chef. Loves food. I connected with him, but his wisdom, maybe because of his age, I mean, we're both the same age, but his wisdom about how to build a business as you're building influence, for me, is what makes him interesting and, frankly, valuable to other creators because of that experience and insight. Because I think a lot of creators know not only do they need business, they ultimately need to build a business. And he built a business that became valuable IP both on the intellectual side, like the branding, but also an actual product.
Do you want this random like orange mocha frappuccino thing, or do you want a macchiato? Yeah. All right, let's make a coffee. This is my drink, and I can make it on any machine, and on the Breville machine right now, there's a program just to make this drink for me. I have it all dialed in. It's called the Grantiato.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I mean,
look,
we can wait
the
for that.
Grantiato.
I mean, I also want to respect your time if you got to get going. I'm literally going to ask you 2 questions.
Let's do it. Let's just get going. This is it. I'm already making a coffee.
His company was into making hardware. It made a sous vide machine. It's something that cooks water through like just dunking it in water. If you're a chef, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you don't, you just put it into a Ziploc bag, remove all the air, dunk it in water, and then it cooks it at a low temperature, controlled temperature.
Here's what I like to do. Warm cup,
Yeah, of course.
cold coffee. Pull our shot.
I look forward to making a cup for Judy every single
That's so lovely.
day. That's my favorite thing to do, and I still stare at her the same way I did when I first made one.
Shut
I
up.
wanna know. Well, no, not in a cheesy way. I'm like, how was it today? Like,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Was it good? Was it like?
Yeah, you want
did
the feedback.
I want the feedback, because she's like, oh yeah, it's fine. I was like, is it just fine, or is it like better than yesterday?
She hates my guts. What did I do? You guys are cute. You guys got a very good thing.
Along with building his channel and that getting views and building influence, he had an actual product to sell to his community, hence why it got bought out by a big business, and he's up there, one of the most successful YouTubers I know. He probably wouldn't even call himself that, but his YouTube channel, I believe, is a huge reason, maybe the main reason, why both his product was successful and then he got bought out.
Yeah, this is my favorite little coffee drink. Sometimes in the wintertime, I'll add sugar or chocolate or something. But
For me, I've been adding maple sugar lately. Wow. See, I cannot do that.
looks like the machine. Looks like the picture on the machine.
A Grantiato?
Yeah. That's just a warm up too, you know. I don't know. I haven't made one in a little while.
It's so good though.
I like to fill the whole bowl with it.
Were you ever a barista?
No.
Did you have to make it when you were working at the restaurant?
I did when I was the chef at Mistral, just because I was the only one who was really passionate about coffee. I'd be like, all right, I'll make them. So I would make them, but it's just like everywhere I've been and at home and through work, just making coffees all the time for 20-something years now, more, 25 years.
You know, like you've told me about, you know, working at the restaurants and transition to starting the business, starting the channel. You've never really told me about what was your strategy for YouTube. You know, when you first started your YouTube channel, so one of two questions, right? How did you build such a big influence on Chefsteps, even though Chefsteps is a brand? I know that you're the talent, right? Or you're the face of it.
Yeah.
But in any niche, but especially in food, that's kind of unheard of.
Yeah.
And you didn't do it the way like these New York, you know, Bon Appetit or whatever did. You did a little bit. I mean, like for me, from my perspective, it seemed more like a creator would, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Even though it's a brand name. What was like your strategy in the beginning, and how did you get views?
Yeah.
Even though it was a brand versus a talent.
There's been, so, man, I launched the YouTube channel for Chefsteps in 2011 or 12, something like that. So a long time ago, different time then, way less videos. That was like right around Charlie bit my finger, I think. Like right around, there wasn't a lot going on. It was different. But you know, one thing I just know about marketing and advertising, building communities, even back then, is like you gotta know your audiences, talk directly to them. And at the time, it was hardcore professional chefs who didn't have modernist technical information access anywhere. Yeah. You know, so right off the bat, it was shipping techniques on YouTube. If you look at the first couple of years, it was all techniques. A lot of it wasn't even my face or personality driven. It was like super tight hands and skills and fine skills and measurements and things. The other part of the strategy was no language, because within the first few years we had subscribers from like 140 countries around the world.
No language? You mean like you weren't talking? Not
really, no. Or very, very minimal, because it was so visual. All humans are really visual. Yeah. But if you're, you know, print a book in English, like only people who read English can read it. Yeah. So the videos were all hands and techniques, and I've seen this be big again in the last like 3 years with like these Korean and Chinese videos. Yeah. It's just like crazy technique. So we'd put measurements and numbers for the recipe on the edit, and it would just be technique kind of speaking for itself, as because a recipe is a natural story anyways, like beginning, middle, and end, ingredients, process, technique, finished food.
And then, so what?
That was the first few years of the YouTube strategy.
Yeah, but
and then we realized professional chefs don't have a lot of money, so we had to switch to like home professional
and
cooks.
then, so
and stuff.
what was the content change when you started trying to reach out to a broader audience?
They needed more information, so they needed to hear it from someone they trust. So they needed to hear. That's where some personality comes in now, of just like, hey, I'm going to teach you how to do this. Da da da. Hardcore chefs don't need it. They just need the recipe, the technique, and then they got it.
Yeah.
So, but the aspiring home cook, aspiring home professional chef, they needed a little bit more context, a little bit more broken down, not just a technique, but a full dish or a full meal or something like that. And they wanted like somebody that they can trust to teach them how to make it.
Yeah.
I just also at that time, so you don't abandon your old audience, don't fire your customers if you don't have to. We still made sure we created those stories on YouTube with hardcore chef techniques embedded in them.
Right.
So that way the hardcore chefs would be like, that's a fucking dope blueberry muffin or whatever. Or that thing they did with the freeze-dried blueberries or whatever is really rad, but a home cook could just make a blueberry muffin if they want. But you make sure you have those really amazing techniques in the video.
So it sounds very focused on the viewer and kind of the thing that you brought to the table, right?
Yeah.
That was the core part of the content. But what about the YouTube side of it?
Yeah.
When did you start looking at YouTube like, okay, I'm looking at the feedback, I'm looking at the data. What were like the things that you did specifically YouTube as a platform? Because the one thing that's unique about Chefsteps, even though in the beginning you're super focused on a small audience, and even later, even though you brought in, it's still a specific viewer, you got tons of views.
Yeah. So there's, we've had almost 1,000 videos shipped on YouTube now. Yeah. And like a lot of channels who do that, you're going to have like the top 5 or 10% of your catalog probably do 90% of your work and views for you, and then you're going to have a bunch of like swing and misses and stuff.
Yes.
So even today, like our top 20, 50 videos do most of the view subscriber work, and then the rest are just like fell flat into like the SEO abyss or something, which is fine. But early on, and for probably the first 5, 6, 7 years of YouTube, we were creating really cool content. And if you want to learn more, come to Chefsteps. And as the last, especially 3, 4, 5 years have changed, and this is a lot of platforms, but YouTube especially, platforms don't like that. They don't like you sending people away. They want you to optimize your content for people right here, right now, which makes sense. So we'd have to change video strategy a little bit. And even now, in the last couple of years, I've had to adjust a couple of times. I'm sure you've seen it too, which is, you can't give them like a tease of a recipe and say, get the full recipe on Chefsteps, but nobody's going to share that on YouTube. Nobody's going to really watch it. They're like, this is a fucking ad. You're like, it's not an ad, but a kind of ad, but I'm just trying to get you to look at my website, just like anybody else. So now for me, it's shifted to, and we're still always dialing this in, and you're always kind of chasing it. Really, what the end goal, what I want all my audience to do is be on my website buying our products.
Yes.
YouTube's how you find more audience. We're not a brand or an entity that only exists or only wants to exist on any of those platforms, but they're a really valuable platform to find humans, because that's where everybody's at. Yeah. They're on YouTube. And that's how they find you. It's still the second biggest search engine next to Google, right? Yeah. So we have to find what works in our editorial and YouTubeify that, which means give it all away, make it really amazing, still have a really good story, have a really good pitch. Another thing that Chefsteps have done, we're a super, super visual brand, so people learn really efficiently through visuals, so especially cooking and those things like that are just more organic learning, like techniques and ingredients and seeing the texture's got to look like this. Yeah. You could say the steak should be 123, but I know I want it to be that red when you cut it open. So,
have you ever made a video where you thought for sure this is exactly what the audience wants, and it didn't
fucking
hit?
Bombs.
And now, like years later, do you see if that was just a disconnect, or there's some kind of chance also involved? Do you know what I'm asking?
I think I know exactly what you're asking.
Because
I'll answer it both ways. For me, like the biggest wins we've had that are like they take off and they get millions of views. Yeah. Those are ones probably 95% of the time I know from the pitch and before we shoot it, because the idea is so rad that other people are going to get excited about this, as long as you don't F it up in post. As long as we don't fuck it up in post or screw up the edit in the first 10 seconds, we'll be golden. I've had way more that I've been like, you know, this isn't going to work, but you got to like try things and keep going. It feels a little, and then it just falls. Some of those have broken out. That's surprising. You're like, huh, I didn't see that coming.
For the most part, you know before you even start
I think
recording.
you feel it. Like some examples we used to have of like, we'd have pitch sessions with the team for years, and sometimes the team would be like, there's a pitch, like, everyone's laughing. I'm like, then we're keeping it. And they're like, no, it's too weird, too inappropriate. Like, no, if everyone's laughing, we're keeping that one. That one we're moving to production. Sometimes, and if nobody's laughing, but like this makes sense for editorial, like, it can't just make sense for editorial, you know, because then it's like nobody's gonna. People want to watch things that they're, you know, they can tell the person delivering it's passionate about, the team behind it's passionate about, they really believe in, and that always comes through in the delivery, the talent, the edit, and all that good stuff. So
that's interesting because the instinct partly comes from the interaction and the organic reception of people around you. But how did you build that instinct up without that? Or is the instinct really just reliant on how are people reacting to it in real time? How did you build that instinct beyond your own circle? Because you know, that could also be its own vacuum. So sometimes it all sounds right for everybody. Do you feel like over the decade you've been doing this, you've also built an instinct for the audience globally? And how did you get that instinct?
I think that's for me, that's a bigger question than YouTube, because when I've got a problem that's so big to solve and so worth solving, that's when I think in like hardware and content and software and consumables. Like we plug in other products. Like that problem's so big, somebody should be able to have that show up in their mailbox and they click a button and they can make it and cook it and watch the video to cook it. If it's just YouTube or something, it's entertainment and infotainment. So where am I getting my information from? But you know, I don't know. I feel like the more we've gotten into the recent few years of YouTube too, it changes so fast that as fast as I've learned about it, I haven't gotten so much better at like a better batting average, you know. And then we have an old channel now where I think we've used it in some different ways. That's been a CMS on the back end too, and I think YouTube doesn't like that. But I would say that the one thing that's always been constant is whatever you're making 10 years ago now, and this is something we've always been aligned on as a team and a company, is make it evergreen. So we don't chase small, like this is trending right now. We don't do that. And I don't think it's a good content strategy for a team or a company at all.
Because it was an evergreen focus.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't pop off right away, but over time, I mean, this is like geek in me. The algorithm figures out where the audience is, and then they distribute it.
Yeah.
So the second question, I know I asked you like a million right there, but it was like two different parts. The one thing that really sticks out about you and the wisdom you've gained.
I'm going to make an iced coffee. I'm not going anywhere.
Partly because this is how you started on YouTube.
Yeah.
You find that a lot of creators, their biggest weakness is they're building an influence, right?
Yeah.
And even though they think they're building a business because they're making money from AdSense and brand deals or whatever they do, they're not really building a business, right?
Yeah.
Like their business.
Yeah.
And of course, I can kind of relate to that. I've not only done that. Go ahead, you can just.
I'm hitting this.
Yeah, I don't care.
I was gonna say the most important thing that everybody needs to hear is, and that's how you get rich on YouTube. Did you write that down?
But you know, I think that's universally understood.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. The thing that, I mean, this goes back to the question about your YouTube channel.
Yeah.
It wasn't Grant Crilly. It was Chefsteps, right?
I've got a lot of thoughts on that. That's always been very intentional. That's because as a business owner, I wanted to develop other talent too, because I didn't want to have to be, like I talked to Jamie Oliver 10, 15 years ago about this, and you hear this from other folks, like he can't make any videos for the brand or for the company, and everybody's job depends on him showing up on set every day. That's different. And a lot of creators don't know that that's the race that they're in. You're competing with businesses who have more dollars. You're competing with every creator out there, but you need to build a business if you want, unless you just want to own your own job. And this is like a lot of folks don't know the difference between creating a business and owning your own job. Most people just own their own job, which is like you have to do everything. You have to be there all the time. Business is like systems and people in place, and like I can go on vacation and things keep happening, you know?
So, I mean, I guess to clarify too, what you're saying, and you've said this to me a few times, is creators should focus on both building an influence by making amazing content that people want to watch, but at the same time, they should actually grow a business. And what's your advice for creators?
So I would say a couple of things. One, I think the thing that creators have to their advantage is people want to do business with people who believe what they believe, not businesses who need your business. That's from Simon Sinek. Totally subscribe to that. And the hard thing about like what I've done the last 10 years is I've always tried to build more talent so I don't always have to be here on set. It's like, do you want to be Lauren Michaels or do you want to be Chris Farley or whatever, you know? Lauren Michaels is like develops a bunch of talent and ideally you own it. That's what Bone App did. They own a bunch of talent, not just like one thing or one face. So that's a different strategy. If you're a creator on your own, you have one thing going for you, which is like you're always there, you know what you want, you know who you are, you can define your brand by yourself. And like brand's just a fancy word for business's reputation. It's really like if that's your personality, that's your brand. The one thing I would say for creators is do what you're doing now, focus on what's passionate for you, because you have to love the moment of doing it. The people who are the best like doing every little thing here and like doing this. If you don't like that part, you're never going to win.
Right.
So you can't like the end game. You got to like the journey and all the work
well,
of doing the work.
A lot of creators do is they do all of it and they kind of live in denial, saying they love it, but really they don't.
Yeah.
And then I know this for a fact because when they ask me, how do I hire an editor? Or how do I business
you don't like
manager?
doing that, huh?
You don't really like doing it, right?
I'm going to grab a little ice.
Because if you really love doing it,
you would want to do more of it.
You would do all of those things.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think like my wife is a unique creator.
She likes
the whole kind of thing. This is where I think like
I don't like editing.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like
I like pitching. I like contenting. I like talenting.
In fact, in the beginning, you probably
I like
didn't edit
strategizing.
at all, right?
What?
From the beginning, you already were thinking.
Oh yeah,
team,
I don't want to edit.
up.
Yeah.
My one question.
A lot of people really love it, and the people who are really good at it really love editing.
Yeah, and then I guess, I mean, that's not part of the conversation. But what is advice for someone that has to do everything themselves? But at the same time should be growing in business. Where do you even start?
I'll give you some tangible ones that aren't so philosophical. Tangible ones are the cheapest, easiest thing you can do is have a tiny property, digital property on the side that you own. Like just a website, a Squarespace. And you post something nice there each day, and I just get your email. If you can just get their email, it doesn't matter if YouTube goes down or change the rules or whatever, you start to own your own audience. So go hard on YouTube. Get an audience there, but try to have something on the side where you're always like, have like a telephone they can pick up and call my audience. That's like email's like the best ROI long term. Just have an email list, work on an email list. And people, you're always gonna find if you've got a growing audience, a certain percentage of them will want you to email them things because they like you and want to hear something else from you that doesn't make sense on YouTube, you know? You could just have an email list that's like, if you want to hear my process of how I make my videos or how I come up with my recipe ideas, I'll put a little blog post each day, and it's like 10% as much work as the YouTube video maybe, and people are giving you an email for it. So yeah, the one thing is do what you have to do to get your audience attention, but don't confuse attention with value. And this is a good lesson I've had from my mentors for more than a decade or so. You can have a big audience on YouTube or Facebook or Instagram or all of it, but if you don't own the audience, like you've got to be careful of what you're building, where you're going. You're just in this kind of hamster wheel of creating content for the platform. Really benefits the platform, and it's good to make money, and there's a lot of folks who do really well at it, but I think this goes back to like most people aren't making a ton of money on it. Very few percent are killing it.
With short form creators, because I mean, I'm going to pick on TikTok. The numbers definitely don't equate to their opportunities because so many people have the same type of numbers now, you know? It's just crazy how many people are getting the silver and gold play buttons because literally one video could get you 100,000 subscribers because it's so easy to thing. I guess my last bonus question, though, this is more of a fun one. What's more valuable? Influence as a creator or a business of a creator?
Influence of a creator, a business of a creator?
Like, and I
think that's a personal choice.
Personal choice, but then in the context of like your day.
Influence of a creator means you're always going to be in the business of selling yourself all the time.
Yep.
Business of a creator means I can go on the beach in Tulum and my bank account's still populated with money.
Which, by the way, you do, right?
I do. Yeah.
You know, one thing too, like I love about your life, of course, I think anybody would love it, is the fact that you can go off for a month and be totally MIA.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how disconnected you are. And that's one thing.
I like to get totally, and it's a personality thing. I like to get totally unplugged. Like I don't like, when I go on vacation or if I'm at the beach or I go to the mountains, I don't like to, it's not for everybody, but I don't have phone, I don't have email. I just like it. It's great. But when I'm here, I like to go hard on it.
Say you had to reset though in 2024 today. which one would you work on? If you had 8 hours in the day, percentage-wise, what percentage would you work on building your influence? And that means content, that means posting, that means views, that means engagement, versus the business.
Okay.
In the beginning.
I would change business word with a product. So I would make sure I have a product. And once I have a product, it could be a book, it could be a service, it could be a hardware product, it could be anything. If I have a product, then once I have a product, then I would put all my energy into influence.
So you would
selling
do the product before
Yeah.
influence.
I think so, or knowing what you think it might be, you know.
Got it.
But otherwise, you're just doing whatever the audience wants you to do and whatever the data wants you to do. You
So
don't
what
have an anchor
about
point.
percentages for those analytical people in your day? Is it 50-50? 50% of your day, like half the day you're working on content?
Well, you asked me what I would do if I had to start over right
Yeah.
now, and I would put 100% of my time into a product until I have a product. Maybe it's 3 months, 6 months,
Yeah.
a year and a half. Then I would switch gears and maybe document it as I'm going and building the origin story
Yeah,
of the product or
right,
whatever.
right.
Again, it could be a book, it could be a new catering business, it could be a new hardware product or a new technology. But then you're gonna be like, I have a product, but I don't have an audience. And then that's the most organic anchor point to like audienceify the hell out of this product story.
And
but just having an audience, then you're like, what am I going to sell them? Now I got to start talking to people like, hey, can I sell your product? Or hey, you want to give me $5,000 and I'll talk about your cream or your butter or something?
Well, you know, of course, I totally agree with you. I think a creator has to think like a business, right? Because there's a lot of creators that become creators and then they have to. So I don't think there's any wrong or way. And like you said, it's a personal choice. The reason I ask is because I wonder, there's probably people that create great products, that create a great business, but and this might be super biased, I find that as time goes on, there's almost a FOMO for the influence because there's so much value in being influential.
Yeah,
hence why
for
creators,
sure.
even if they're not a savvy business person, right? They still have so much value in the business world. They get the like red carpet treatment for them, and if they're not savvy enough, they might get taken advantage of. But for me, if I had to like default, like say you had to choose one or the other.
I think folks who know though know like billions of people love Michael Jackson. I would never want his life. You know, like
because you're saying
he's so successful, Michael Jackson. You know, R.I.P. But like, I would never want to be Michael Jackson. So like, don't confuse like the work they're doing and the real life they're living. Also, like, so the folks who are always winning are usually workaholics and have other issues too. You know, like.
So if you had to choose one or the other, you would choose the business and the product versus being a creator and an influence.
I don't know. I think it's a false dichotomy. I think you want both. Like an audience with nothing to sell them isn't worth anything, and a product with no audience is just like a big pile of debt. You know?
Yeah.
So if you have to get started and you don't have investors, I think you should start with an audience, and that's why you have a lot of creators. There's way more people creating attention because it just costs this much versus creating a product. Yeah. So if you create an audience, you can find an investor to help you develop a product. That's what we did. We started with an audience, and then we had investors be like, we should make products for this audience. We're like, let's do it. And we made products that our audience really, really loved.
What's interesting now, because you're saying if you started over, you'd flip
I would,
that, right?
But now I have access to investors and all sorts of folks who are like, Grant, what's your next product?
So that it depends on your circumstance.
Yeah,
like,
but I think it's a false dichotomy to say either or. I think if you have to start from scratch and nothing, you don't really have a competitive leg up, I think you have to start with content and attention because it's just you and a phone in your mind, and that's beautiful. But it is.
That's all it is.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
But it's good if you're going to start with a product, you know. Then it's like you can develop a book or a website pretty cheap these days. It depends what the product is, though. You know.
For sure.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, even if you build a huge audience, you're gonna be like, what are we going to sell them?
Yeah. No, I mean, one thing, the last thing I'll say, really, it's not a question, that's unique about you is you have your own influence, right, as Grant, but your ultimate influence is with Chefsteps because that's where you were going to sell the product that you guys were developing, the sous vide machine. And that's where I have a lot of respect for you. I feel like I learned a lot from you because you've had that business-minded vision from the very beginning versus with me, you know, the way I started. It's like Judy became influential. Free makeup getting sent. I'm like skipping a trip to the mall. I'm not waiting for her outside the makeup store. Like it was very practical in the beginning, and over time I was like, oh my gosh, her influence is so valuable that they're paying us crazy amount. You know, I lived in a farm town. My first job was picking strawberries, so I'm going from that, you know, college dropout to like
dang, these are some pretty big checks. I always had the ambition to make money. So like I was a business person for her, different business model. But now when I look back and I think from 2008 to 2024, in those 16 years I've been doing it, I definitely lean more on it's both for sure, right? It all depends on your circumstance, your resources, your know-how.
Yeah.
But ultimately, if I had the pendulum swing one way, it's still influence, but not influence by itself. Because like you said, what does that even... Because, you know, you could actually have 10 million followers and it means nothing. Yeah. Right? So what kind of influence probably matters too.
There's quality of audience too and influence, right? You can have 10 million 9-year-olds following your channel, but like they got to go ask their mom to buy your product or something, you know? If you have a high quality audience that's like very wealthy, medium income, and they like to spend all their disposable money on their passion, hobby, cooking, then they buy all your nice products and stuff too. So like, whatever you're doing, like, I think you always just got to like take an analysis of what I have, what resources do I have, like what's the first step or two. Yeah. I also think, you know, I've been a big believer in grit and like just always, you got to sign up for always loving to do the work no matter what happens. And there'll be bad things and terrible things and bad, like stressful things that happen. You just get through it. And before you know it, you go through like, I've been working full time for more than 25 years now in my career. And there's been so much stuff, you know, layoffs and fires and breakups with business partners and investors going south and all sorts of like, you know, there's been lawsuits. And then at the moment, sometimes you're like, everything's over. But then you get through, you're like, oh, okay. And then the next thing happens and you get more cool-headed about all that stuff. But if you quit that first time, you know, you just get stronger and more level-headed, a little bit wiser the longer you go. So I think there's a fine line, though, of folks who are just like spinning their wheels and making things without knowing where they're going to. So I do think it's important to like stop for a second and ask yourself, if I'm doing this video strategy or making this product, like just think about it in your own mind and like, write it down if you want. Like, where does this go if this is or what does this look like if it's very successful? Even just have a vision for 3 years out or 10 years out. Make it up in your head. But if your vision's like, I'm 20 years older and I'm just always on set and they're always having to film me versus I have some thought of, oh no, I'm going to sell them some products or attach a service or I'm going to develop other talent around me or something like that. You just make it up in your head. But in the plan, it's going to change.
But the reps, I think, are
none of the stuff I really planned. We've had successes, but none of the exact things I think we've planned over the years turned out exactly the way we thought it was going to turn out.
Well, being in the game is the most important thing. Putting in the reps teaches you what's important about the game, right? And then ultimately success goes to the people that have the right timing, that have the best product, that do it the best. I was curious, do you have any questions about the creator economy right now? Like, is there something that you're like, you know, I wish if I could have the answer to this, this is the thing I'd want to know. Not that you're asking me, I'm just curious, what is like something that you look at and you're like,
Well, I send out a note or I put out calls whenever I have a friend or somebody, I won't name names, but you can just go on YouTube and know who they are or whatever. The folks who are like, every single time they make a video, it does like 2 or 3 million views. So I'm like, what's the fucking secret sauce that they know that I don't know? So I can increase my batting average. So I always think like people also just need to have humble pie and like, who's like really killing it too. And if you can get access to them, like, you know, I don't know if you know them or develop a relationship or whatever, but like, what can you model after out there? So for me, I don't know what the answer is, but the questions I would want to know is like, how do you increase consistency on what you would define as success? So like every video, like everybody's got a different cost, but I've got a full-time team here and we make videos. Every time I make a YouTube video, whether I like it or not, it costs me like many thousands of dollars because it takes a team or whatever. So if I have a big win, it works, but if I have a fail, the fail still costs me like tons of, like many thousands of dollars. You know what I mean? So increasing the rate of that, of the successes. I know, but some people are doing it. Some people are really doing it, and they have a really but they have a very high batting average, you know? So I think looking at what they're doing.
And of course, people are in different seasons too, because that person that's doing it at that level wasn't always doing it, right? And there's be one day where they'll fall out of fashion, right? The trend that they're riding, and I think I know who those people are. You know, I've been doing this for so long now. I also know there's ups and downs naturally. But a good friend of mine probably understands YouTube better than anybody. Sean, right? Co-wrote YouTube Secrets. He actually said something just this last weekend to me I thought was fascinating. He was talking about somebody else that he kind of coaches, right? And they said they cracked the code of YouTube. I was like,
weird. We always said, him and I, is like, there
Yeah.
is no real code, but what he was really saying is they just fell right on the right wave, the right niche, the right timing. And then I said, you know, that person that I top, because I know this person that cracked the code. They also have been in the industry of entertainment, right, in their niche for like decades. We're talking since the 90s.
Yeah, so they have some other domain expertise that's really deep that they're bringing in.
And they have a relationship with their audience. So when he said crack the code, so I mean, like, I think the big takeaway for me, like, I'm not trying to give you advice, but like if I was in your place, right, where I'd see like and get maybe some FOMO, it's the curiosity that leads to you asking the questions and trying to find the answer, but then at the same time putting in the reps, right? Executing on whatever their advice is that gets you to crack the code. Because what I know about this person that Sean was talking about, they also sucked on YouTube forever. Like
before
it was almost like hard to watch their stuff because you know like really successful already, you know, millionaire, but like why wasn't it working for them? And then they cracked the code. And it's just interesting that even someone like that who understands the value of reps still thinks like people. So that's the one thing my thought is, and that's a last opinion or
let me ask the same question you asked, because now I have thought about this many times over the years, and this goes back to people wanting to do business with people who believe what they believe, not business who need your money. The way I see the landscape too for YouTube right now is, and this is a question I want to know because it'd make me refocus energies, like, can a business be as successful on YouTube as individuals or individual creators?
No.
Yeah, you're saying no right now. I'm still asking the question. I think you're probably right, but you know, does that mean businesses will always have to buy attention from creators moving forward on those platforms? You know, which is a good economy.
I thought about this because I actually do corporate consultations.
By the way, you've got 60 seconds to give me the answer to this question.
Yeah, corporate consultations. And I always say this, like I use Trader Joe's as an example, right? Trader Joe's should just have a Joe. If there was a Joe guy, then it would work. But Trader Joe's is a brand, right? It wasn't work because
where's Joe?
Because I'll tell you the last thing about YouTube that any person should always remember. There's a reason it's called YouTube. Broadcast yourself. That was the original slogan.
Not them too.
Instinctually, people understand and they want it, the connection with the person. And if you don't have a person, a brand will never win because you don't build a relationship with a fridge. You build it with like the person that's taking the ingredients out and making something with it. And so
but a counter to that is
20 seconds.
Okay, a counter to that is BuzzFeed built a huge audience off of no talent, but then they started to crash. Yes, and I started helping them building talent into their videos like 8 years ago or something.
They still have talent.
Right, well, they had to switch gears and go back to developing talent. But the business as a brand is like nobody fell in love with the brand enough. Yeah,
that's a different question. You can build a successful business around a brand, but they'll always need a face.
Yeah, and that maybe goes back to the audience. The audience needs a face.
By the way, thanks for the coffee.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm like really wired now.
Me too.
I can like talk. First off, love Grant. He is one of the most successful creators I personally know. And we could have talked for 2 or 3 hours of the things that he could teach. In fact, he didn't even really go in the direction of YouTube optimization. I think the takeaways, though, he's always focused on the person watching, right? In the beginning, professional chef. Secondly, more broadly, people that need tips for cooking, hence Chefsteps. So, love it. You guys go to Chefsteps if you guys want to see what they've accomplished the last 10 plus years. But I've got some takeaways. You were sitting there. Was there anything that stuck out for you?
I thought it was really wise of him to talk about the different paths that people have to success, what they want for their lives, what they want for their business, and what makes sense to them based off of what they have access to when they begin. You know, it'd be really easy to say, well, this is how I gain success, and that's how everybody should do it. But he has the wisdom to say, well, I started one way, went another way, and now I have a different approach, right? And I think that is definitely something to listen to.
Yeah, and the reason I wanted to even talk to him was because I do believe it's probably one of the biggest weaknesses of most creators is building an actual business.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, they're great at making money, but there's a difference between just making a lot of money and building a business that lives beyond your everyday actions.
Well, I think that his point was important there, right? That it's actually, you know, it is a business when you're a creator, right? But the important distinction that he made was that you have to have a product right?
Yeah.
If you really want to go beyond, then having your own property is the thing that ends up being the thing that's valuable to you.
Something that makes you money even if you don't post up content, which I think though at the same time you always need to create content because that is what the viewers care about. That's why they even like if there's a business, because there was one thing at the end, I don't know if you caught it.
Yeah.
Maybe the best piece of advice. Best piece of advice, I wasn't expecting it, just kind of came out of nowhere, is hey, at the end of the day, you really have to love what you do. Because it's all about hitting the pavement every day, right? Going through the motions.
Getting the reps.
Right, exactly. We talk about reps, you know, of course, me being a vlogger, it's what you're doing every day that reveals the actual secrets that tell you how to be successful in your content versus having the perfect plan or perfect product. Or even knowing how to create content, because guess what? Like it doesn't always work out.
Yes.
So did you hear that at the end?
I did, yeah.
Right? And I don't know if you were laughing. I was laughing inside. I was just thinking, if somebody just heard that, that inevitably would lead you to all the other advice he gives because you would realize it from doing it.
It's the higher order good, right? It's the thing that leads to all the other decisions.
Okay, you're way smarter than me. Say that again. It's a higher order of good?
It's a higher order good, right? It's the thing that's another level above all the rest. It's the bigger principle to take away, the big idea, right?
Yeah. So anyways, those were the big things for me. Oh, also too, he really simplified building a business for something you wouldn't think of, which is just building an email list.
Yeah, no, seriously.
A way to communicate, because if you don't know, he was bought out by a bigger business, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what the price tag was, but I heard he's pretty successful at that. But I believe the distribution, he talked about that, right?
Yep.
People have products, but they don't have distribution. Well, when you have influence, that is to a certain degree distribution.
Totally.
But even more solidly is an email list that you control, because you know, say YouTube changes the algorithm or Instagram says, hey, you know, we're gonna cut your reach in half. Well, email list will go to everyone's inbox just the same.
Yeah, a good way to think about it is who actually owns the customer at the end, right? Or who owns the viewer, right?
I know it's a cringy way of looking at your viewers, but yeah, it's like who owns or controls the communication.
Another way to think about it is who the customer goes to, right? Customer doesn't go to your website or your channel. They visit YouTube first, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you have their email, well, they go to their email and they check your email, right? Or if you have a website, they go to your website and check your website, which is his approach to the market, which is I think is more stable for a longer term business if you are willing to do the work to sell a product, which is the hard part.
For sure. Okay. I'll talk to you guys later. Anything else you want to say?
No, that's all. Subscribe.
Yeah. Subscribe for more creator secrets.